You're listening to the Behind the Scenes Podcast Diary, episode number 19. Welcome to Amelia's Behind the Scenes Podcast Diary, an exclusive look at the behind the scenes misadventures of a 30-something thriller writer. Discover how close she is to releasing her latest novel, hear exciting details about upcoming writing projects, and discover the lessons she has learned along her writing journey so you don't have to make the same mistakes. You can find the episode show notes and lots more information at ameliahay.com/podcast/BTS. It's been one of those weeks. You know, that week that starts off crappy and turns into a nightmare. But my week eventually redeemed itself in the final hour. This is going to sound overdramatic, but I've got the opposite of the Midas touch. I'm sure there's a name for that, but it's completely escaped my mind at the moment. However, I'm going to keep this show rant-free as much as humanly possible. I had huge dreams for last week: commission a beta read, finish my revisions for missing, and work on smarter goal setting. Just hearing that makes me want to laugh and cry all at once. For the sake of adding to this drama, I'm starting to get bored of working on missing. There's a part of me that needs to look at something different. For the sake of calming my nerves, I'm drinking a cup of chamomile tea by, yes, you guessed it, T2. By the way, they are not sponsoring this podcast. That would be perfect because I'm a bit of an addict. However, I'm merely sharing this with you because I love it and I want to inject a bit of my own personality into this podcast diary episode. The only problem I have with this blend is it stains the inside of my giant teacups, especially the ones with the white interior. So I've got two types of teacups. I've got the one that I'm drinking from now, which is purple on the outside with white dots, and on the inside it's white. And then the other one is sort of white on the outside. The other pair is they're white on the outside with like a brown type of dot, and it's sort of like this browny grey shade in the inside, and they don't seem to stain as well. They don't seem to stain as much, possibly because they're quite dark. As of Wednesday, I reached the 43% mark of The Pharaoh's Secret by Clive Cussler and Graham Brown. At present, Kurt Austin and Joe are walking through a museum warehouse and have discovered some armed guards who are sweeping the warehouse looking for a mysterious Egyptian artifact. Kurt discovered something that was briefly mentioned in the prologue and discarded it in favour of moving on to find out why the bad guys were in the warehouse. I know I don't usually share plot moments, but I'm a little bit too involved with the story at this point. The latter half of the week, I didn't get as much reading done due to my workload, but I love the story and I can't wait to get back to reading. Last week I contacted Frostbite Publishing about their beta reading services on Tuesday and again on Thursday because I didn't hear back. Nevertheless, I received confirmation that the company does beta read crime thrillers and they have no problem reading a revised manuscript that is yet to be professionally edited. And furthermore, I now have the next availability for the beta reader. The next step in this process is to compile a list of questions to submit to the beta reader and book a slot in their calendar. On next week's show, I will either share the list of questions or discuss the type of questions that I plan on asking the reader. There are a few points that I need feedback on in terms of the overall story and the reading experience. I'm a little worried that my story might be boring. To be honest, I never thought that I would feel this way because I loved writing the first draft. The story excited me, and at one point I couldn't wait to start writing, so I guess I want to check that I didn't over-edit my story. I'm now starting to see what I suspected all along. Even though I've set deadlines, I'm at the mercy of the calendars of the professionals that I want to hire. This was my original reasoning for not setting hard deadlines, but I've changed my mind because I need a little motivation. Deadlines are great, but creating a professional product is a little more important. Compared to the previous week, I didn't do as much editing in terms of working hours. Last week, I performed 5 hours of self-editing using AutoCrit as a guide. I ran 3 reports, showing versus telling, filler words, and passive voice. The reports are an excellent guide because without them, this stage of the editing process would feel overwhelming. It's nice to have something that says pay attention to these things. My focus was on excessive usage of telling, filler words, and passive voice. I didn't want to delve too deeply into the passive voice rabbit hole because I honestly don't know what I'm doing, and I would rather have a professional line editor tell me to fix certain things. To be honest, line editing feels a little out of my depth, like I've slept through medical school and I'm now doing an autopsy for the first time. And furthermore, you can have too much of a good thing, especially when it comes to showing versus telling. Sometimes it's okay to tell a reader something instead of showing them everything. During my revisions, I ended up turning to 2 books. The first is The Emotion Thesaurus. I use this as a reference guide for showing emotion instead of using words that tell how the character felt. As you're probably aware, seeing a character express emotion is far better than using the phrase he felt and its equivalents. I've also turned to the book Revision and Self-Editing by James Scott Bell during my revisions for the Showing versus and Telling report. Chapter 8 was filled with helpful examples of how to fix this problem in your manuscript. If you're revising or just about to start revisions, I highly recommend you get your hands on that book. So that's what I got up to last week. I'm hoping in the next behind the scenes podcast diary, which is episode 20, that I'll have finished the self-editing phase for Missing, submitted the story to a professional beta reader, and started revisions for Silence, and received a quote from my line editor and hopefully some good news in regards to whether my manuscript is ready for editing. Thanks for listening and happy reading and writing, everybody. Thank you for listening to Amelia's Behind the Scenes podcast diary. If you love this episode, then hit the subscribe button and leave a review on your favourite podcasting app. I'm your host Amelia, and I'll see you next week for another diary episode.